Welcome to the Medical Manners Podcast, where I give healthcare providers simple tips for ways they can transform the way they connect with their patients and colleagues. Connecting with patients isn't some secret sauce that some of us have and others don't. They're just skills, implemented consistently over time. If you want to transform your medical practice, you're in the right place. I am Katie Wyatt, your host. Today's episode is sponsored by the Learning from Lawsuits podcast. This is a podcast that I co-host along with Dr. Charles Pilcher. Each month, we review a real medical malpractice lawsuit case, discuss what went wrong, and what we can learn to prevent similar mistakes in our own practices in the future. This is definitely worth a listen for any healthcare provider. I have learned so much doing this podcast. Check it out wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to the Learning from Lawsuits podcast. Dr. Eiferman, thank you for being here with me today. I'm going to read your bio so that our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Dr. Daniel Eiferman is a tenured professor of surgery and has been recognized as a top doctor by Castle Connolly since 2018, an honor given to only 7% of physicians nationally. Upon completing his surgical training, he obtained a Master of Business Administration at The Ohio State University Fisher College of Business, and then developed and teaches leadership courses on topics that focus on performance improvement, team building, and physician resilience. He is the author of Cut Open, A Surgeon's Stories of Loss, Resilience, and Growth, due to be published in early 2026. He is most proud of his marriage to his beautiful wife, Alyssa, and his relationship with his three wonderful children, Julia, Jeffrey, and Abby. So, Dr. Eiferman, thanks for being here with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Katie.
I'm curious about how you came to write your book. Give us some background on how you decided to do that.
So the first notes that I recall writing down about ever wanting to write a book actually were from my third year of residency. So I first had the idea 2 decades ago. I read Atul Gawande's Complications when I was in medical school, which had a pretty profound effect on me. And then as I started kind of down my own journey and gathering my own stories, I started writing them down, bits and pieces. And then it really materialized a couple of years ago. I had a couple of residents and I said, I've always wanted to write a book. And they're like, you should do that. Be like, oh, you're just saying that. Or like, no, I would read it. And they pushed me and I would write chapter every 6 months, something like that. And then something in my personal life happened. You ready for this? And you can tell me if your kids are at this point yet. They got driver's licenses. And all of a sudden, I had more time on my hand where, we used to do the divide and conquer of, who's getting gymnastics tonight, who's getting baseball tonight, who's getting swim tonight. I started having a little bit more time on my hand in the evenings, and that's when I really got to be able to write a little bit more.
Gotcha. Our oldest has his driver's license, and man, that's a game changer.
Game changer for sure.
In the opening paragraph of your book, you talk about an experience that you had that had a poor outcome and kind of how that affected you. Do you mind telling us that story?
Not at all. The book starts with me telling the worst complication of my career. And there's kind of a two-pronged approach to that. One, I really believe that the number one way to build trust in people is to show your vulnerability first. And so I just wanted to come out with the opening, like I'm dropping my guard and letting you into some personal things that I've struggled with. And I'm hoping that immediately helped build trust with the reader and that they would want to continue to read and hear my stories. And then secondly, that case was tough on me. I'm not sure the scars ever fully heal, but you have to learn how to bounce back if you're going to be in healthcare. You can't avoid all mistakes. And I put in the book, the only surgeons who don't have complications are the ones who don't operate. Yeah. And I had to have a strategy to get better. And I really decided that the way that I was going to grow and recover was to go out and talk about things that we usually don't talk about, especially as surgeons. And that was the impetus for starting the book that way. Probably the most asked for talk that I give is something I titled "There's No Crying in Surgery," which is a spoof
Mhm.
on, A League of Their Own. There's no crying in baseball, and I show the clip of Tom Hanks just absolutely berating his outfielder for making a mistake, and I always say, "So Tom Hanks was my attendings when I was a resident, and I'm the outfielder, and it's like, how does this make us feel? And there's probably a better way to do this."
I love that. I think vulnerability builds trust with colleagues, with you and the residents that you're training. I also think it builds trust with patients when we are confident in what we know and then we admit the limitations to where we don't know something. I think that builds trust. And so I love that part of the book and I love how you started like that.
I appreciate that. The word that I usually use in there, it makes you authentic. Okay, you're a real person who, makes mistakes, who screws up, all that stuff, not a robot, but somebody who has empathy. And those are the type of people that you can relate to. And when you have that relation, you can make a connection. And when you have that connection, you build trust. When you have that trust, you have that relationship together where, good things happen.
Yeah. And I think it's so cool and I can say this because you said yourself especially surgeons don't typically
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah.
And I think in general surgeons are the people who can fix everything, right? You know everything, you can fix everything, and that can be a really tough mold to fit into because it's not true. The greatest surgeon doesn't know everything. The greatest surgeon makes mistakes. Like you said, the only surgeon not making mistakes is one who doesn't operate. And so I love that whole idea of vulnerability and being authentic.
I think the fallacy that people have is they believe that when you come in as a surgeon to see a patient, say, I think you need an operation, that we believe we must come off as the all knowing, omnipotent, completely confident. And I do think that you have to show some confidence, not to jettison that completely. But I also think that needs to be mixed with, again, some vulnerability, some humility, things like that. And I think you'll form a stronger bond with patients and families by doing that than by just coming in here and saying, "There's nobody better than me at this. Let's go."
Yeah.
Which I think is the stereotype sometimes that gets given off or what we think the patients and families want to hear.
Yeah. I love that. As I was reading through your book, which to all of our listeners, I highly recommend your book. It was a great read. I
Thank
learned
you.
a lot. The thing that I want to talk to you about today, well, there's a couple of things, but one of them was a thing that surprised me most about what
Okay.
I learned in your book. And that was the section on curiosity. So
Sure.
in your book, you talk about how the trait that's most associated with being a good healthcare professional and many of us may think high intelligence, technical skills, empathy, yada, yada, yada. Research has shown that it's actually curiosity. And that I think is surprising. So tell me how you came across this idea and teach me on why it's so important.
So I'll answer your question this way, Katie. One of my favorite things to ask in a lecture, on rounds, anything like that. And you've read the book, so you know what the answer is that I'm going for because I start chapter 2 with it. But I ask people, what's the most important thing that you have? And many people will, can you clarify that for me? Are we talking about a tangible thing? Are we talking about a non-tangible thing? I said, there's no right or wrong answers. Here's the question one more time. What's the most important thing that you have? And I've gotten many answers throughout the years, ranging from health, family, pets, friends, all kinds of stuff. And I say, here's my answer. I say, time is the most important thing that you have. And I say, I spend more time thinking about how I'm going to spend my time than I do anything else. How much am I going to be dad today? How much am I going to be doctor today? How much am I going to be husband today? Friend today? How long be able to relax for? Different things like that. But
Hmm.
there's this great commercial by Samsung with Danny Glover that talks about time being the most important thing that you have. And one of the lines I love then it's like, even if you're rich, you can't buy more time. It's a fixed quantity. So I believe that time is the most important thing that you have. So how does that tie into curiosity? When I go in with a patient and you say, how long you been feeling bad? Tell me more about that. Describe the pain for me. Is it always there? Does it come and go? When you're displaying that curiosity, what you are de facto doing is saying, you, patient, you are worthy of the most precious thing that I own, and that is my
Mm.
time. And so that's where the curiosity comes in and being, I am granting you the most precious thing that I have. And when you're doing that as a teacher, you are worthy of the most precious thing that I have. Let's spend some time learning how to read a CT scan or this technique for surgery, things like that. And I think that's why it's the answer, because that's what you're doing for somebody else. You're gifting them the thing that you prize and value the most.
Yeah. I love that, and when I read your book, time was not the first thing that came to my mind.
What
But
was your
as I
answer?
I would have said my family.
Family? Sure,
Yeah, but I mean, as you say that, time is the most important, and I choose to fill a lot of my time with my family because
sure.
they are the most important people to me. But yeah, I mean, I love that idea, and then the question, and I think the hard thing becomes, we have very tight restrictions on how much time we have with patients.
Mhm.
And so, how do we take the time that we have and fill it with curiosity? What does curiosity actually look like in the room? And what are some changes we might be able to make to be more curious and to use that time well?
So here is my answer to that, which actually is not in the book, but it's a separate lecture that I was once asked to give. And it was like, how to be successful in academic medicine or something like that. I was like, all right, nobody's going to come listen to me give that talk. So I renamed it. How did Walmart become Walmart? And it's pretty funny the answers that you can get when you ask that. But when I read the book, The Walmart Effect, the thing that I took home from that is Walmart became Walmart by being maximally efficient. They found ways to cut out pieces that weren't value adds and things like that until they became the behemoth that they are. So, analogy or translation to what we're talking about right now. As time is the most important thing that I have, I want to spend it maximally efficient. So I wanna know what are the value adds and what are the not value adds. And that's true in a patient interaction. It's definitely true for me in the operating room. I'm constantly trying to, is that a value add? Is that not a value add? If it's a value add, then we need to spend our time in it. If it's not a value add, then we need to move on. So I always ask the residents, what's the goal of surgery? The goal of surgery is to get out of surgery. And
Yeah.
so, again, why are we, do we need this? Do we need this extra test? No, I don't think that I've already made my decision. This person needs an operation or doesn't need an operation. Am I going to ask the 120-point checklist that I learned in medical school to every patient that I see? Whether or not you have appendicitis or not, I actually don't care what the water cooler or temperature in your house is set at, or if there's, you know, fire extinguishers underneath, and all that stuff. It's like, that's not a
Right.
value add for what I'm trying to. So I tell you, you got to learn to be maximally efficient, be a master of your time. And so that set amount of time that you have with the patient, we got it. We got all value add things in there. Then we can make the best possible decision and we move on to our next efficient thing.
As I was thinking about this interview and what I could contribute, something that I thought of for curiosity is if we can take the same questions we always ask, but ask them in a different way, we can still use the same amount of time, but approach our visits in a curious manner. And so one way we can do that is instead of saying, "Do you have any questions?" which we say at the end of our visits, right? Do you have any
Sure.
questions? Instead of that, we can say, "Tell me what questions you have for me." Any sentence that can be answered in no is a curiosity killing question. If you can answer it in no. And so if we can just change our questions to tell me what questions you have about the recovery for your surgery. Tell me what questions you have about your check-in day. That's curious on our end and that grows that connection and the trust with our patients. So I thought that was a really easy switch that we can make.
I would agree with you on that and take it even one step further. And one of the classes that I teach, a leadership class, session 3 is navigating difficult conversations. What are some tips and tricks to get us through them? Overwhelmingly, by far, open-ended questions are the way to go. yes, no questions are, like you said, conversation killers, things like that. So you're correct. Do you have any questions? No. That allows, maybe they're intimidated, maybe they're embarrassed to ask, things like that. But when you ask an open-ended question and you demonstrate your curiosity, and then
Mhm.
again, I'm giving you my most precious gift. I want to know more. Now we have trust. Now we have a connection between each other. The article that I reference in the book that's in, I believe, Scientific American is worth reading. It's a short read and it has a pretty good hook at the end that I will not give away on your
You
on your
won't give it away.
podcast. No, but it's pretty cool.
I will link that in the show notes so anyone who wants to read
Gotcha.
it. Okay, so the second thing I wanted to talk to you about is in your book, you ask the question, can insight be taught to someone who doesn't have it?
Yes.
Tell me about this section. How'd you come to write about this?
So I think this is something that people struggle with significantly. And again, not to play too much on stereotypes, but surgeons aren't exactly known for our wonderful personalities. That's not, I don't think that's the first thing that comes to mind when people say, oh, surgeon, God, easy people to hang out with, you know, open minded, you know, uh,
Warm and fuzzy.
warm,
Yeah.
fuzzy, all that stuff. So you get a bunch of people like that together, and sometimes, getting change done or even identifying that there is a problem that needs to be addressed, even that can be a struggle. It was really early in my career. I tell the story in the book. It was actually my first year of being on faculty where I had a difficult trainee who did not understand how they were being perceived. And that was tough for me, being somewhere that people looked to try to rectify behavior or things like that. So that's how I got started down that road of can insight be taught? Because I actually in the book put the chapter immediately after the time chapter because I wanted to tie the two together. And that was along the lines of if it's not teachable, therefore, it is futile, just like we talk about futile care. Why would I do something that is futile? Why would I spend my time, my most precious asset, into something that has no chance of being successful? I should go and take that time and allocate it to something else. And that's how I started down that road of trying to figure out, is it a teachable skill or is it not a teachable skill?
Yeah. So is this something that you teach in your leadership classes? And what's the most effective way you've found to do it?
The short answer is yes and no. So I shied away from this topic for a long time because I thought it was too delicate or too touchy. And I actually really have to thank a previous resident of mine who was like, "No, you should really attack this because this is what people want to know." And I actually named the lecture after her. And I wrote a seminar dealing with difficult personalities. And yes, in there, I gave different strategies to deal with different types of difficult personalities. And then I went on, I don't want to say a soapbox, but a little bit of a soliloquy during that talk that is in the book that says teaching people insight, if you want a yes no answer, the answer is probably yes. But the cost is it takes a phenomenally long time to do so. Then you get to make the decision for yourself. Is this something I want to invest my time in or do I not want to invest my time in? But the answer is in most cases, the answer is yes. I'm going to predict that your next question to me is going to be, do you have a tip or a trick or anything like that that you could share with your listeners? Would I be accurate in that prediction?
Yes, I'd love to know that.
So, first thing, the number one predictor if somebody has insight is have they ever asked for help before? People who lack insight in general tend not to ask for help. They've got this.
Ah,
So, have they ever come back and sought feedback from you? Hey, Katie, could I have done, how was that interaction or would you have handled this differently? And all? So, that's a good sign if they have. If they've never done that, you're probably in trouble. Something that I didn't put in the book, but I like talking about, and it is in some of the seminars that I teach, is it's kind of, you're going to laugh because you're in healthcare, but it's called PEA versus NEA. And PEA is not pulseless electrical activity. It's positive emotional attractors versus negative emotional attractors. And without boring you with the kind of the science behind it, if you just want to say positive emotional attractors are associated with stimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system. Negative emotional attractors are when you stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. You are going to have about a 0% chance of getting somebody into a growth mindset or being open to change if you are stimulating their sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, or your negative emotional attractors. However, if I can keep your parasympathetic nervous system stimulated and keep you in PEA, there's the funny part. We don't ever want to keep
Mhm.
patients in PEA.
Right.
If you can use questions like, Katie, what would be the benefit to you if you got better in this area? Now it's all positive. So we're on the
Mhm.
same team. I want you to get better. You're probably already good at what you do, but now I've framed it in such a way that there's a advantage to you or something that's good going to happen. The NEA, Katie, if you don't change, I don't think you're going to be able to work here anymore, or we're going to have to take a title away from you or dock your pay. Right there, you're now defensive, right? And you're going to go to defending yourself. However, if I could say, hey, what would be the benefit to you if you got better in whatever you want to say, patient interactions, this technique, billing, coding, what documentation, whatever, because then it's a win-win. So if you
Mm,
want, so for people who struggle in that area, if you can get their mindset to see it in a way of this would help me, then they're more open to being changed. And that's how you can, that's probably the number one thing I can say in terms of helping people who have poor insight try to get behavior change out of them.
huh, that's so interesting. And I spend a lot of my time researching the benefits of improved patient communication. And I think if every healthcare provider knew it, they would be on board because it's patient outcomes improve. Provider job satisfaction improves. Typically, pay goes up. Practices thrive. Risk of medical malpractice decreases significantly. Patients are typically more compliant and less combative. I mean, it just like goes on and on and on. But I think a lot of times all we hear is we hear from management, your likelihood to recommend scores are too low. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what we hear and it bugs us. It's annoying. And so like you said, we go to this kind of like defensive get off my back place.
Correct.
Whereas if providers truly knew that their life would be significantly easier, decreased risk of burnout. I mean, so many things if they worked on their ability to have insight, to connect, to relate, all of that stuff. So I love your insight on that, and I think you're spot on.
I appreciate that. Once you stimulate the negative, I think you gave the example, your likelihood to provide, are too low. So if you present that to me, immediately I'm going to get defensive. Okay. And what's going to happen is I am now going to go to defending my dignity over actually talking about what the issue on the table is anymore. Because our core belief is that we want to be valued. And what you are de facto saying, likelihood, Danny, you're not very good at what you do. Who you are is not good enough here. Well, I've spent, you know, 11 years of training to get this job. That's very hurtful. And
Yeah.
so I am going to go into defensive mode to tell you why that's not true versus actually talking about strategies that are going to make my likelihood to recommend scores go up. And then the whole conversation did not cover or, you know, come to any agreement on what it is we were actually both trying to achieve. So
Yeah.
that's why the whole PEA versus NEA thing makes a difference, the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, all those things that are out there.
Yeah. Okay, so my last question for you, because I feel like you've done a lot of self-reflection done a lot of growth. It's clear from your book that you have a growth mindset. You're always looking for ways to be better and do better. So if you could look back and give a piece of advice to someone just starting their medical training, someone in your shoes, however many years ago when you started, what would your advice be, or something they could do to make their life easier?
Well, I'm gonna have to think about this one for a second. No, I think I got it. There's a couple of words and traits in the English language that I can't stand. The number one trait that I really don't like in people is selfishness. That
Mm.
is that's difficult to work with. 20 years ago, if I could talk to myself or somebody who's starting out right now, my answer would be there are times in your life where you need to be selfish, and there's times in your life where you shouldn't be selfish. So I give the example when I took step one for the boards, which was the test that used to matter back in the day. My understanding it's pass fail now and it's gone on to step two. But step one was the test when I was a medical student. I was married 5 months, I think, when I had to take step one to Alyssa. And I said, Liz, this test determines our future together. I know we've only been married 5 months. I'm going to study 10 hours every day, 6 days a week. You will see me for dinner. I'm going to come home between 5 and 6. And that's all the time that we're going to spend together. And we've been married 5 months at this time. That was a time in my life where selfishness was necessary to get me to the where, I wanted to be personally, in my marriage and setting up my family and my profession and all that stuff. Then you need to learn how to be unselfish and when you need to be a giver. And that should be most of the other times. And if you get those two times confused, I think you're going to struggle professionally. And I think you're going to struggle personally.
That's great advice.
That was a tough question. I was not ready. I've done a couple of these podcasts now. I was not ready for that one.
Should have
Uh,
given you a heads up on that one. Yeah, and to your point, I think life is all about that balancing act. And you're probably constantly, at least I'm constantly evaluating that to see
all the,
where and that's a lifelong balance.
yeah. In general, giving is the path to happiness. And if I'm sure you've memorized every word of my book, but if you remember the chapter towards the end that talks about the secret sauce of when teams perform at high levels, and that's when you give discretionary effort. That's when you go above and beyond, doing more than you have to do. That's being unselfish. That's going back to check on the patient one more time, asking that question to make sure that they understood, calling that colleague to make sure they're all right, going above and beyond. Most people who do that are unselfish. And then that begets the behavior in the other people. And when that happens, that's when teams function at the highest level. That's when organizations thrive. And that's when earlier you had talked about all those other good things happen. Patient satisfaction scores go up, lawsuits go down, all that stuff. That's how
Yeah.
to get there. But you can't do that if you're selfish.
My mom had a sign above our toilet growing up that said, "Give people more than they expect and do it willingly." And
Ooh,
I think
good
that's
one.
exactly what you're saying there is you just go one more step than you have to. And you don't make people feel like they're being a burden. You do it willingly. You do it because you love people and you want to be great. You want to be great at what you do.
And I'll second that. When you see somebody else going above and beyond, make sure you let them know, hey, it's great to be a teammate with you or a colleague with you. It's I'm lucky to have you on the team.
That's awesome. That's a great piece of advice. Dr. Eiferman, thank you for being here with me today. Tell us when your book is going to be published. Where can we find it?
The audiobook just got finished yesterday. For people who are audiobook listeners, that is not quite available, but hopefully by the time you publish it, it will be. But I'm on all the sites where, Goodreads, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, my website, integritysurgery.org. We'll gift you links there, as well as if you ever wanted to contact me about doing a seminar, if you just need some peer support, things like that. So it's all out there. Most things I've been telling people, if you just go to Amazon and type in cut open and my last name Eiferman, it comes up. So thank you for that shameless marketing plug. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, I think it's important for people to know how to find you and where to find you. And I wish you all the best. You deserve it. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Appreciate it, Katie. Thanks for saying it. And thank you for having me. And thanks for doing this.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, the best way to support what I do is by rating and reviewing the podcast. Your feedback helps me reach more listeners to make an even greater impact. It would also mean the world to me if you would share it with a friend or colleague who you think could benefit from the topics we discuss. Together, we can transform the way we deliver healthcare by transforming the way we connect. Take care.